Hey everybody, I'm Missy.
And I'm April.
And this is
SheelaNaGig.
Hey everybody, welcome. How's it going? Thanks for listening. Each week, of course, you know the drill. We present and explore our own SheelaNaGig, a woman whose strength and perseverance has led her to greatness. Somebody who inspires us, somebody who empowers us. And it could be somebody you never heard of before that we would love to share with you. It could be somebody you have heard of, but maybe you haven't heard the whole story. So that's what we're about, and we're just so happy that you're tuning in. Thanks again for listening, and thanks for all your questions and comments. Keep them coming. All right. Hey, April.
Hi.
How's it going?
Not too shabby. How about yourself?
I'm good. Do you hear that saw in the background? I don't think anybody can hear the saw. This is our home studio, so sometimes, we got to lock up the dogs. We get a little riffraff from outside.
Little kids coming down for a snack.
Yeah,
the neighbors doing something outside with the buzzsaw.
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. But anyway, what's been up with you? How are you?
I'm actually great.
Yeah?
My daughter, Sarah, came home for the weekend.
Yes, we got to see 4 Women in Red.
Yes, we did. And by the way, if you haven't seen 4 Women in Red, it's a fabulous production and
so good at the Victory Theater. We did
West Hollywood.
We did a little
North
blurb
Hollywood.
about it. We did a little blurb about it on Instagram, but you know, check it out.
But anyway, last night, Sarah left this morning and she offered to make dinner. And since she's gone off to college and my son and his girlfriend are living with us right now.
You're a good mom.
Well, I'm trying. But we almost never have meals together anymore. Everybody's always going in different directions.
Yeah.
And so she offered to make dinner last night. And both Sam and his girlfriend, Alora, were home, as was myself and my husband. And so Sarah and I, first of all, went to the market. We had the best time. We loaded her up with snacks to take back to school.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really fun just having her pick all the stuff she wanted. And then she barbecued. Well, Missy's a vegetarian, so she's not going to appreciate the fact that Sarah barbecued chicken and she made mashed potatoes and she barbecued broccolini, which was unbelievably great. And we all sat down to a dinner together, and it was just so nice.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds lovely.
It's just the simple things. Sometimes you're just so grateful for the simplest thing.
It's true. It is true. It's lovely. I went to Dana Point yesterday, and we met up with my brother and his partner, Jan, to celebrate Christmas and his birthday and my daughter Ellery's birthday.
I love it. You're celebrating Christmas it's only February.
Yeah, and it was funny because we both showed up with these giant boxes of like presents, and the people next to us were like, "Oh, can we join your party? What's going on?" It was. But we opened all our presents in the restaurant, and it was really fun. It was at Wind & Sea and Dana Point, and my brother treated, which was very lovely.
Oh, that was nice.
We walked around. It was beautiful in the harbor, so it was good. It was good to just kind of hang, do our thing,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
And again, it was fun to see 4 Women in Red with you and Sarah.
Right. So it was a nice weekend.
It was a good weekend.
Good family weekend.
That's what I'm going to say. Yeah, totally. Right. It was good.
Yeah.
But what else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else exciting to tell you or to ask you. I can't really think right now. But
that's all right. You know me. I'm always waiting for the Sheela.
I know. You're
like, bring it on. Bring it on.
Like the chit chat. We kind of have this joke about like if we're out somewhere together, chances are I'll start talking to a stranger and I'll start kind of like going into my studs circle, interviewing them.
And I'll be rolling my eyeballs and thinking, when is she going to shut up?
Like, you don't even know this fucking person.
Right,
we're never going to see this fucking person ever again. Can we just leave? This is such a waste of time.
I know,
oh my God.
Right?
And I know that look on her face and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in trouble. But then I just
kind
can't
of giving
stop
it
myself.
to you now.
I can't stop myself.
I know.
I'm not even talking to a stranger. I'm talking to you.
I know, but
I told her earlier today that it makes me a little nervous because I always feel like she's like, if
chop.
if I talk
time
too
is
much,
wasting.
If I go on too much, like I might get the hook.
Okay, so folks, if I weren't this neurotic time person who wanted to cut to the chase and Missy was left to her own device, this would be the 24-hour podcast, right? Just 24 hours, all of Missy talking all the time.
It would just never end. I'm a slow lever. What can I say? I'm a slow lever.
You are a slow lever.
I'm a slow lever.
And I'm out the door and 5 blocks down the street.
She's already got her foot out the door, honestly. Like, time is a ticking here. But we are going to talk about a Sheela. I got a Sheela for you today.
Okay.
I got a Hella Sheela.
Tell me about your Sheela.
So, do you remember a while back I talked about an amazing Sheela, Mary Elizabeth Anderson?
I do.
She was the inventor of the windshield wiper.
Correct.
Do you remember that?
I do remember.
Yeah, and sadly she never got credit.
No, she got a patent for that windshield wiper, and when it expired, all the car companies took the patent.
Yeah, she never renewed it.
And took her brilliance and made windshield wipers.
Yeah, it was very sad.
Remember it well.
Very sad. Do you remember in that same episode at the tail end, I talked about somebody named Charlotte Bridgewood, and she had actually taken Mary Elizabeth Anderson's original design, the manual design, and she devised the first electrically operated automatic windshield wiper.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I remember that, yep.
So it kind of, what the windshield turned out to be was a result of both of these women.
Right.
So that invention was named the Storm Windshield Cleaner, and it used rollers instead of blades, and it was patented in 1917. However, her design was also not a commercial success, and her patent ran out in 1920. And did she renew it?
No.
This just kills me, but okay. So like Mary, she lost her product rights, and of course the windshield wiper became widely adopted. We all know.
Right.
So this is very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. Both these women invented amazing things,
and they were ultimately used, but the women never got the credit or the money.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. But you may also remember, though, that I had talked about Charlotte Bridgewood also having a daughter who was an inventor, and I remember...
You did say something
Yeah,
about
and we
that.
laughed because she had kind of a funny name. And she had followed in her mother's footsteps, was also an inventor, and I said, "Ooh, I'll have to do this Sheila in the future, right?"
Uh-huh.
This rings a bell, right?
Right, you're ringing bells.
So, who I'm talking about today is no other than Florence Lawrence.
Florence Lawrence.
Remember Florence Lawrence?
I had forgotten, but I do remember now.
Yeah, Florence
so you can tell us
Lawrence.
about Florence Lawrence.
Florence Lawrence.
How do you forget a name like Florence Lawrence?
I know. She was a pretty amazing Sheila. She was an activist, a suffragette, one of the first women to form her own production company, an accomplished mechanic, an inventor.
Oh, here we go.
I know.
Okay. Does she work for the dead letter
I knew it was coming. I knew it was freaking coming. No.
See, Maggie worked for the dead letter
And
office,
April's never gotten over it. She's never gotten over it.
Okay.
I try to choose these Sheilas who do like a million and one things. But most of the Sheilas we do
Most
do
of
a
them
million and one things, right?
Right.
I'm not
true.
doing my list though. So I said an inventor, but she was also one of the first mega stars of the silver screen, as well as the first movie star known to the public by name.
You're kidding.
She's a remarkable woman and definitely not a household name.
No.
Remarkable woman. So
Florence Lawrence.
Florence Lawrence. I'm excited to tell you about her today.
Well, go for it.
She was born as Florence Annie Bridgewood on January 2nd, 1886. And she was the youngest of 3 children. She was the only girl. And she was born in Hamilton, which is a port city of Ontario, Canada. And her father, George Bridgewood, worked as a carriage builder. And her mother, Charlotte, who we talked about earlier, was a stage performer that transitioned into vaudeville using the stage name Lotta Lawrence.
Lotta Lawrence.
Does that ring a bell?
No, I don't remember Lotta Lawrence.
Yeah,
That's
Lotta
interesting.
Lawrence. Yeah. So Florence was 3 when she made her debut on stage along with her mother.
Uh-huh.
And it was a song and dance routine. And by the age of 4, her parents separated. They later divorced. And she continued to follow her mom along, as did her brothers. And Florence was basically brought on the road as a vaudeville performer alongside her mother. I believe the two boys were more kind of the stagehand sort of the business, but they were all part of kind of this vaudeville business. And when she was old enough to memorize lines of dialogue, she performed with her mother and other members of what was called the Lawrence Dramatic Company in dramatic plays. So that was her mother's company. So whistling and playing the violin, all under the guidance and management of her mother. By the age of 6, she had earned the nickname Baby Flo, the Child Wonder.
Baby Flo, the Child Wonder.
I love that.
What made her Baby Flo, the Child Wonder?
Well, she was Florence, so she was Baby Flo.
Oh, got it, yeah.
And she was a child wonder because apparently, she could play violin, she could whistle really well. She was a really good whistler. She was a really good singer. She was a really good actress.
Oh, she was a baby wonder.
She was a baby wonder.
Awesome. Okay.
She's kind of like a little Shirley Temple.
Very cool.
Yeah. So on February 18th, 1898, Florence's father, George Bridgewood, died from an accidental coal gas poisoning at his home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and although they were divorced, he and her mother were divorced at this point, her mother took this as a sign to settle down a bit and moved the family from Hamilton to Buffalo, New York to live with her mother.
Oh, wow. If I were going to settle down, I don't think I'd settle down in Buffalo, New York. It's really cold.
Buffalo is cold, isn't it?
Yeah, super cold.
Yeah.
Of course, we're California spoiled.
I know.
Gals.
I do love Niagara Falls, I have to say.
Niagara Falls is great in the summer.
Super cool. But her mother, again, these kids had been on the road, living on the road, and finally she just said, okay, we're moving to be with my mother and done.
Well, Buffalo isn't exactly the mecca of the theater world.
I know. We're getting there.
Okay.
Right now she wants to settle down.
Okay.
She's settling down with the family.
Right.
She's like, enough of this crazy vaudeville business. Time to settle down.
I can understand that.
So this was the first time that her children were able to enroll in school.
Oh.
She had been homeschooling them.
Wow.
So this is the first time they're finally enrolling in school, and Flo was able to attend local schools, develop athletic skills, and she became an accomplished horseback rider and an ice skater.
Wow.
So she could add that to her resume too.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. And after graduating, Florence rejoined her mother's dramatic company. However, her mother disbanded the Lawrence Dramatic Company shortly thereafter, and the two moved to New York City together around 1906 to pursue acting. So apparently she did she brought the dramatic company with her to Buffalo and continued to do some acting and stuff, but it was much more stable, and the kids were in school, they weren't traveling.
And then after she graduated.
Yeah, and then after she graduated, she disbanded it and said, you know what? Let's go, let's go to New York and pursue a real career in acting.
Okay.
So during the spring and summer of 1906, Florence auditioned for a number of Broadway plays, but she did not have any success, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But with the advent of motion pictures, Florence made the transition from stage to film.
Interesting.
So she decided to try her luck in Hollywood along with her mom. So very quickly thereafter, they moved to New York in 1906. By 1907, they decided to try their luck in Hollywood. She was aged 21 at this point, and Florence secured her first big role in Daniel Boone Pioneer Days along with her mother.
Wow.
So they were both in the same film.
That's amazing.
I know.
Wow. How kind of cool that is.
They were pretty tight, the two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in 1907, so now we're talking a short time here. We're talking 1906, she's in New York. 1907, she's in Hollywood, gets her first role. In 1907, Florence went on to appear in 38 movies.
Holy moly.
For the Vitagraph Film Company.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is. That's a lot.
That's a lot. Of course, these were not talkies. These were silent films, which are shorter than talkies. Mm-hmm. So they were shorter in length. Not always, but I think for the most part they were. So she purchased her dream home after being in 38 movies that year. It was a 50-acre estate in New Jersey, and she was also able to purchase her own car for the first time. Wow. So she had always been kind of obsessed with cars, and this is certainly a luxury item in the early 1900s. And driving at this time had just really become a symbol of women's liberation. She was a very liberated woman as well. So she was very excited to get her first car.
I have to ask.
Yeah.
Did the car have windshield wipers?
Probably not.
Oh, man.
No, it did not. It did not.
Okay.
Because we're in the early 1900s still. We're still in the early 1900s, right?
I had to ask. Okay.
I think it was, 1917 when her mom invented that?
I think you're right.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, okay.
That's a good question, though. It needed that, though. And again, Florence was a car enthusiast, and she loved driving. She loved kind of learning how cars worked. And this led her to some later automotive inventions, which I will just mention.
Okay.
She learned everything she could about automobiles, and she would work on automobiles, and she said, a car to me is something that is almost human, something that responds to kindness and understanding and care just as people do.
Wow. That's interesting.
And she was often found under her hood tinkering and learning about the inner workings of an automobile. She had said that every little creak and squawk of her car she wanted to learn so she could remedy it.
Wow.
Yeah. She had said, the average woman does her own repairing. She is curious enough to investigate. So she took an interest in not only her own car, but she also learned to drive competitively and started driving race cars as well.
No kidding. Wow, you're right, she's pretty remarkable. Sheila, badass.
She's badass.
Yep.
So, of course, this, again, secured her interest and hinted at her future endeavors. But getting back to her acting now, in 1908, Florence began acting in films directed by D.W. Griffith.
Do you remember D.W.
Griffith?
I do remember D.W. Griffith. He's an important guy in film.
Yes, absolutely. At the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company. So in 1909 alone, she starred in 65 films at this studio.
Wow.
60 of them were directed by D.W. Griffith. And, of course, she was more than overworked and suffered the first of 2 nervous breakdowns at this point.
Oh, that's sad.
It's very sad.
Wow.
I think she couldn't stop. She was kind of,
Well, I'm curious to know if it was that she was driven or the studio was driving her.
Well, I think it was a combination of both. And I think, she had a desire to do many things. I think, she was an avid horseback rider. She was, into her car. She was racing cars. She was doing movies.
Fixing them,
she had a lot going on. Yeah. I think she was kind of that type A personality. So, I'm sure she was overworked, though, by the studios as well. I'm sure that was not a kind atmosphere.
Well, it generally wasn't. That's why.
No.
You wonder.
So, according to Bright Lights Film Journal, when Lawrence did go back to work on a picture called The Slave, dozens of inquiring reporters from San Diego to Seattle were waiting for her. They crowded the Universal lot when she pulled up in what was described as a vehicle the size of a luxury yacht. And she strode confidently toward the cameras. The press wanted to glimpse the plucky, but apparently brittle little woman who would become an international symbol for both glamour and the hazards of the fledgling film industry. But as usual, Florence didn't do what everybody expected her to do. She knew she couldn't control the headlines that would blaze across the country the next morning, but at least she could do the best to charm them and to perhaps mildly perplex the news hounds. One can only surmise it was all a superb performance on her part. The reporters were left to conclude that the whole motion picture business would surely be and remain a great national asset. While in the hands of this rare artiste, wrote the Los Angeles Call, she is one in a million.
So she charmed them.
She did.
Good
I think after this, she took a little break. She had a nervous breakdown. They were expecting, again, this very brittle, woman, and she just strode at them with confidence and smiled. And
good for her.
They were very impressed with her.
Awesome.
So, although she appeared in numerous films, her name was not known to her fans. I never knew this. This is interesting because at the time, apparently, the studios seldom added actors' names to the credits.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they didn't add them. They would put the players.
The players.
And especially if they were women, they certainly weren't credited. And the reason behind this was that the studios didn't want anybody's fame to get too out of control. So they feared that if people knew their names, that star could run away with their name. And, it would embolden them to demand more money.
Imagine.
And more rights.
Which, of course, ended up happening soon enough. Right. But, yeah.
So this was a way to kind of keep them on a tight leash.
Interesting.
Yeah. But Lawrence was a prolific actress, and she was actually renowned for her stunning beauty. She was a beautiful woman. You have to see her. Very unique. She had a unique beauty and striking, absolutely striking. So as soon as she started working for Biograph Studios, fans in the media were talking about the Biograph Girl. Oh, she was known as the Biograph
Girl. Mm-hmm. Who is the Biograph Girl?
Exactly. As she became more popular, she, of course, insisted on daily wages as opposed to weekly wages.
Good for her.
And she wanted better benefits. And she also demanded twice the normal salary and her own makeup artist and table.
So much for the fragile little gal. Good for her.
That's right. Well, she knew that she had this power at this point.
Right.
And so she used it. So during this time, she met fellow actor Harry Sultan, and she worked with him on a film called The Girl and the Outlaw. And Lawrence and Salter ended up falling in love, and they got married.
Oh.
In time, though, with Florence making all these demands, I don't even see them as demands. They were making a lot of money off of her.
Yeah, they were expectations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Good for her. Biograph became less willing to accommodate her demands, and in 1910, both she and her husband, Harry, were suddenly let go.
Oh.
I know. I'm sure they regretted it. But soon enough, of course, she was just scooped up, along with her husband, by Carl Laemmle of Independent Motion Picture Company, IMP, they called it.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. According to Vanity Fair, whereas Griffin had treated Lawrence as a disposable, Laemmle considered her the best actress of her time, dubbing her as the greatest moving picture actress in the world.
Wow, very nice.
Valued her.
Yeah.
For a while, at least. So sad. He signed Florence to a $1,000 a week exclusive contract as a feature player.
Nice.
Do you know how much that is today?
How much would that be today?
$35,000 a week.
Oh, I think that sounds pretty decent.
$35,000 a week. So that's
good for her.
$1,820 a year.
I'm sure she made them more.
Yes, it's true. But that was absolutely unheard of then.
Wow.
So audiences continued to love Florence, and they still didn't know the name behind the face. But it was Laemmle who planned a bold publicity stunt to promote her. He was about to release a new film that was starring Florence Lawrence. So he decided that he would just start this rumor that the Biograph Girl was killed by a streetcar in New York City. And of course, this gossip just spread like wildfire. Everybody was talking about it. It was all over the press. And once, the gossip mills were churning, Laemmle revealed the dramatic truth. Not only was Florence very much alive, but she was about to star in his new film, and he had signed her to Imp Pictures. And the film was called The Broken Oath. Mm-hmm. So this was a very exciting moment. It seems so dreadful that you would fake somebody's death and then, surprise!
That's Hollywood.
Don't be sad. I actually signed her to Imp, and she's in a new motion picture.
Come see it.
So she reemerged on March 25th, 1910 in St. Louis for the opening of the film, and throngs of fans appeared just to catch a glimpse of her. They were grabbing at her. They actually, tore her clothing. They tore buttons off her coat, feathers off of her hat. It was just a frenzy. But it was exactly what Laemmle was hoping for. He had carefully orchestrated this, dramatic entrance.
Yeah.
And it paid off. So on the street, then and there, you could say a star was born. And she was the most famous movie star of the silent era. And Carl Laemmle saw that potential in promoting actors as stars to draw audiences by publicly naming them, such as he had done with Lawrence.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So IMP broke that industry norm and set a precedent for the star system in Hollywood.
Whoa, pretty groundbreaking.
It's very groundbreaking.
Yeah,
and something I didn't really know about or think about before.
No, me either.
Yeah. So she became the first American actress to receive billing under her own name, marking the birth of the movie star, so to speak.
Wow.
So she's considered Hollywood's first movie star because of that.
How amazing.
I know. So according to Christopher Sanford from Bright Lights Film Journal, the film The Broken Oath tapped into what may have been the most powerful part of Lawrence's appeal. in the film, which has no great artistic pretension, but does enjoy a healthy undercurrent of sexual force, Lawrence more than once takes the opportunity to stare long and hard into her co-star's eyes, her own gaze raging with love and kindness. Ooh, wow, yes. She is a noble woman whose strength and grace are mirrored in her every movement. It's the sort of intense, if slightly histrionic performance that might draw Oscar nominations today, but that also perhaps bespoke a certain inner fragility that over time would be fully exploited by a succession of hard-nosed studio bosses and unsuitable husbands, making her a kind of prototype Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, how tragic.
I know.
Oh.
That's so well written, but it's very sad.
Very sad. Very sad.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Flo.
Poor Flo.
Poor Flo. Okay, so there was just more to her, though. And she was people talked about she was a very kind and giving person, but she had this, there was more substance to her than anybody gave her credit for.
Yeah.
And she had this kind of fetching combination of sexual allure and vulnerability, very much like Marilyn Monroe.
Very much, yeah.
As even one or two of her more churlish critics allowed, beneath the elaborate coiffure lay distinct signs of intelligence.
Well, I'm glad they acknowledged that. How very nice.
Shocking. Florence made about 50 films with Imp.
Wow.
Think about all those films.
A lot. She did a lot.
She's made at this point. And that was just during that year, and her name alone became a huge box office draw. She was often mobbed by fans. She continued to be mobbed. And she went on to be known as Florence Lawrence, the Imp Girl.
The Imp Girl, okay.
She went from the Biograph Girl to the Imp Girl. And it was even rumored that her mailman actually suffered a nervous breakdown from hauling her bags. Her bags of fan mail, because they were so heavy that he just couldn't handle it anymore, and he had to quit because he had a nervous breakdown.
Poor guy.
Yeah. But most speculated that it probably wasn't true, because Lemley was a very dramatic man, as we know.
No kidding, he killed her.
Yeah, he faked her death, right? So probably something that he started, a good rumor that he started. And he knew the value of a good rumor, obviously. The following year, Florence signed with the Philadelphia Lubin Film Company, and she took her husband along with her. However, the couple did not stay with the company long, and in 1912 they started their own film company called the Victor Company in Fort Lee, New Jersey. So with Lawrence as one of the owners, the Victor Company is one of the very first U.S. film companies to be led by a woman.
Yeah.
So that's
who knew?
Pretty exciting, right? Good.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was a very small operation, but it provided Florence with, the artistic freedom that she wanted, and of course a lovely salary that she got to choose.
Right.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing, unfortunately. Her marriage with Mr. Salter grew kind of rocky, and apparently it had to do with the fact that he made a lot of disparaging remarks about her mother, Lotta Lawrence, who was also an actress, right?
And an inventor.
Yes, and an inventor, of course. And she didn't like that. She was very close to her mother, so she found that very offensive. And so later that year, Lawrence left her husband, and Salter set sail for Europe. And he was not happy about it, though, apparently. So he continued to write her letters from Europe, and he would alternate between threatening suicide and begging forgiveness.
Oh, gee.
And these letters now are housed in the Florence Lawrence collection at the Seaver Center for Western History at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Field trip. We keep making lists of places we need to go. And they are undated, but they are numbered in sequins. And so we're definitely about to check that out.
That's great.
And in one of the letters, Salter writes, "Shall I come to New York? Will you give me a job with Victor? I will write you some beautiful stories, comedy or tragedies. You shall be Mademoiselle la Directrice, and I shall be Monsieur le Property Man. You can get me very cheap. I will work for love. Love!
Oh,
So by the end of 1912,
yeah.
they reunited.
Okay. Well, I guess he was poetic in his writings.
Yeah, I guess that really got her.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would really get me.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Well.
I remember, getting letters from boys in my 20s, just poems and things, and I remember reading them with my mom, and she and I would just laugh.
Yeah.
We would just sit on the couch.
Yeah.
And read that part again about oh my God, we would just laugh.
These guys would be mortified if they
I know,
knew.
isn't that terrible? It's so terrible, but I'll bet you she did that with her mom too.
I bet.
Yeah. But unfortunately, their company was still having trouble with distribution. They had not made any profits, and after a short break from their company, Florence also tried producing films, but she was not very successful with that. So the Victor Company was eventually absorbed into the Universal Film Manufacturing Company. Surely we've all heard of Universal.
I think that's a familiar name. Yeah.
And Florence went back to work for Laemmle with her tail between her legs in 1915, and he took her back.
Oh, okay.
Just an aside here that I think is really interesting is that we really have women to thank in large part for kickstarting Hollywood. They were very involved in Hollywood. 100 years ago, women apparently were involved in every aspect of production. They held key positions in the industry. And I learned that half the films copyrighted between 1911 and 1925 were written by women.
Wow, so interesting because it became such a male-dominated.
Exactly. I was really fascinated to learn that. I was like,
that
what?
is interesting.
So they're considered a very large part of, how Hollywood started.
Wow.
And so Florence also, speaking to, women being a large part of Hollywood, she continued to portray these very strong, independent female characters, challenging the era's gender norms, but she also took on those roles behind the camera, directing and producing films.
Good for her.
So she enjoyed...
Well, she was, after all, intelligent.
Really, yeah. She could do other things. So she was also a daredevil on set.
Well,
I didn't even mention
that's not that surprising because she raced cars and...
Exactly. So I didn't even mention that she performed all her own stunts.
Oh, how fun. Wow.
And this is before it became fashionable. So she was kind of risking her life to just make sure that the action was always looking as authentic as possible. And she wanted to be the one to do it. So that was kind of an unheard of thing.
Kind of cool.
For a lot of actors, but certainly for women, were not doing their own stunts at this point.
Right.
So this is another kind of thing that she was doing that was pretty monumental. So she had this, innovative mind. It was just as agile as her acting skills. And outside the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, she continued to be somewhat of a mechanical whiz. This continued. And as I mentioned earlier, she had this keen desire to understand cars. And, she kind of married those observational skills. And it led her down this path of innovation, in addition to being an actress. I mean, she was also an innovative actress, too.
Right.
But innovative person, I should say. So in the early 1900s, the advent of the automobile had introduced new dangers to the public, and a lot of accidents were happening pretty frequently. And they were of high concern because a lot of pedestrians were involved in these accidents. And, they would be guessing, which way is that car going to turn? Is that car going to stop? Right? So Florence was a keen driver, and she loved the fact that she felt really liberated when she drove. I said, this is women's liberation when you owned your own car and you drove your own car, and especially the fact she did her own work on her car.
Right.
But she became increasingly frustrated with the lack of communication tools between drivers and pedestrians. And so instead of waiting for somebody else to do it, she decided in 1914 that she was going to invent the first auto signaling arm.
Wow. Okay.
So this was a button that when you pushed it, a flag was raised or lowered on the rear bumper of the car indicating which direction the driver would be turning.
Well, how...
What do you call that? A turn signal? Hello?
Hello.
First turn signal.
Good for you, Florence.
And then shortly thereafter, she also invented a brake signal to alert drivers that the car in front of them was stopping.
Wow.
So when the driver hit the brakes, a sign reading stop would flip out from the rear bumper.
Oh, how funny.
And this would allow other vehicles to stop in plenty of time behind and prevent collisions.
Brilliant.
I know.
That was
2 inventions, right?
fabulous.
Boom, boom. Yes.
Right.
So, as you like to say, April, we're going to put a pin in that.
Okay.
We talked about those
Okay.
2 very important inventions, and we are going to get back to those.
Okay.
But let's get back to Florence's acting.
Hollywood.
So, that's right. That's right. Hooray for Hollywood. Okay. So, in 1915, after she went back to work for Lumley, she started a film called Pawns of Destiny. And remember how I mentioned that she liked to do her own stunts?
Yes.
Well, a stunt went awry, and she actually was hospitalized.
Oh, no.
And her producer, Carl Laemmle, refused to pay for her medical expenses.
What? That was technically workers' comp today.
Oh, totally.
Oh, right?
Totally. Yeah. He's like, you're lucky I took you back.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, anyway. I mean, I don't know if that's what he really said, but he just, turned out to be kind of a jerk.
Sure.
But it's interesting because I couldn't find out exactly what happened in this accident. But she blamed her husband, Harry Salter.
Huh.
And she said that he had really encouraged her to do this scene, and she didn't want to. She really didn't want to do it, and he thought it would be great for her career and that she needed to do this scene and do her own stunt. And he pushed her to perform this very dangerous stunt. And as a result of that, she filed for divorce.
Wow.
She blamed it on him, said, this is your fault. I would not have done this had it not been for you. What's really sad, though, is tragically that same year, Lawrence was injured in another accident on set.
Oh, no.
Yes. This one I can tell you more about. This one is much more written about. So basically, they had a staged burning happening, a burning building, and it got out of control. And she became trapped. And she could have jumped to safety, but instead she noticed that her co-star, Matt Moore, was struggling in the flames on a burning staircase.
Oh, wow.
So she courageously rushed back in to aid him.
Oh, no kidding.
And she suffered a bad fall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on this burning staircase.
Oh, gee.
So, of course, her rescue effort was successful, and she looked like a hero. She was kind of the talk of the town in regard to
Lemon
that.
must have liked the press on that.
I guess he probably did, yep. But it also left her with a fractured spine and severe burns on her face and throat.
Uh-oh.
And recovery took over 6 months, and she actually endured temporary paralysis.
Oh, wow.
She had several extensive back surgeries as well as some plastic surgery operations for the scarring.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
So it was
bad.
pretty intense.
Yeah.
And guess what?
What?
Laemmle refused to cover any of her medical expenses.
He got all that great press with her being a hero and saving the
I know,
actor.
what an ass. Like, what a
an
fucking ass.
Yeah.
So, of course, she was left financially and physically devastated.
Oh, gee.
Even though she had been very wealthy, this kind of, she just burned through her money
Oh, my
with
goodness.
these medical expenses.
Wow.
And she was pretty destitute. So, after a while, she came back to work for Laemmle, surprisingly. She had a career there, at least.
Yeah.
And she never truly recovered from these terrible events.
Oh.
So while her visible physical injuries became minimal in the end, just a scar under her chin. I said she did have some plastic surgery, and apparently it worked. But according to history, the psychological damage was severe, and she also suffered from constant back pain now.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And historians, of course, have speculated that Florence probably suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder as well as depression.
That. Yeah.
But at that time, they knew nothing of that.
Oh.
But, she had suffered 2 accidents, one which really disabled her for quite a while. And at that time, her changed behavior was not treated with empathy, sadly.
Right.
People didn't feel bad or say, hey, you need to talk to somebody. It's not like it is today.
Yeah.
And even now, it's not always acknowledged,
Not always.
But back then, it was more kind of avoidance and condescension from her coworkers because they kind of found her difficult on set. She was kind of deemed difficult to work with at this point. Huh. And she started kind of landing fewer roles as a result of that, which is very sad. And in 1917, after enduring this for a bit, she just decided that she needed a change. So she decided to step away from her film career for a short time to reconnect with her passion of cars. So it's this time that she became the president of her mother's automotive company, Bridgewood Manufacturing. So her mother had started, she was an inventor, and she loved cars as well.
Yeah.
And she had invented the electrically operated automatic windshield wipers in 1917. So that same year, she started her own company, and she got her patent. And she had left her own acting career at this point and just decided, no, I think I'm going to go on and do this. But Florence, although she loved working with cars and she loved working with her mom and being the president of her company, she still just kind of yearned to go back to the acting world. It was short-lived. So in 1921, she decided to return to the screen, but she just found it extremely difficult at this point to find any work. And she did finally find some work on a film called Elusive Isabel, but she collapsed on set toward the end of the filming and was completely paralyzed for the next 4 months.
No.
I know.
Oh, how horrible.
It's just so sad. It goes from bad to worse.
Oh, dear.
She started out as such a golden child.
Right?
And it just spiraled. It's such a terrible Hollywood tale, Ugh, hate it. She then endured partial paralysis for 4 more years.
Wow.
And she was forced, for the most part, into retirement. This is in 1921, right?
Yeah.
So finally, around 1924, 1925, she decided to undergo some more plastic surgery, hoping to improve her luck.
Okay.
She's gotten a little older at this point.
Yep.
She does have some serious health issues, but, perhaps if she makes herself look a little better, she can get back in.
Okay.
That was her hope. It's so sad.
It is.
Poor women.
Yeah.
So, despite, though, her groundbreaking contributions to both film and automotive safety, by this time, her career never fully recovered after those 2 accidents. And she continued to try to make a comeback, but the changing tides of the film industry and her continued health issues just made it this uphill battle. And by the 1920s, she was largely forgotten by the industry.
How sad. That's ridiculous.
Really
but yet, we know that happens.
So during this time, though, she did meet her second husband, and he was an automotive salesman named Charles B. Woodring. And he was a skilled businessman, and she really admired him. And, Florence was quite a skilled businesswoman as well. And so she decided to try her talents at something else. And she decided to open a cosmetic store called Hollywood Cosmetics that featured her own line of makeup, which is pretty cool. So again, decades ahead of her curve, starting her own store in Hollywood. And ironically, it was just 2 blocks away from where she got her start at the Silent Movie Building.
Wow.
Yeah. But this venture failed as well. Did not work out.
Oh, no.
And at this point, she was kind of just didn't know what to do. So she decided had been a little rebirth of vaudeville.
Yeah.
So she decided, you know what? I'm just going to go back to the theater, go back to some vaudeville. And she started doing a little vaudeville. And by 1927, though, the talkies had started. So she thought maybe there was a chance that this would give her a break.
Right.
But it didn't really, except for that. I mean, it didn't give her a break in the sense that the ingenue work that she was hoping for. But it did give her kind of a leg up over other actors who had not previously acted in silent films.
Okay.
So the talkies were constantly looking for day players and extras who had that prior camera experience. So she started working in films again at that point because she was absolutely somebody who had that experience.
Right.
But they were bit parts. They weren't well paid. But she was just happy to be working again, I think.
Sure.
So throughout all of this, we were talking about her mom and how close she had been to her mom. And, throughout her troubled life from her early years on the road to, the destruction of her Hollywood dreams. Her closest friend and confidant and greatest supporter had always been her mother.
Yeah.
Charlotte Bridgewood. But sadly, on August 20th, 1929, Bridgewood passed away at the age of 69. And according to biographer Kelly R. Brown, Lawrence was hit very deeply by the loss of her mother, and the sadness was probably only deepened by the fact that Bridgewood, despite being a prized stage performer and stage manager for decades, was barely remembered by the outside world, nor was she remembered for her windshield wiper, her patent. So
that was pretty...
She felt terrible that her mom never got her due, so she decided to take a large amount of money to pay for a very expensive memorial for her mother in her mother's honor.
Oh, that's touching.
It's very touching. And she went into it in deeper depression. She never recovered. And of course, then in October, just a few months after her mother's passing and that giant funeral, which she spent just a ridiculous amount of money on, she started to lose her fortune during the stock market crash. And then, of course, the ensuing Great Depression.
This just keeps getting worse, doesn't it?
It's really sad. It is. I don't know why I picked such sad ones, but it's important, though, nonetheless.
This one really had an interesting historical, theme to it that is familiar to all of us. And it really makes you relook at Hollywood and the ingenuity and sensibility of both her and her mother, and when it came to car safety, and how they just got overridden by a very misogynistic industry. Two misogynistic industries.
They just got swallowed alive. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, I know it keeps getting worse.
Okay. Lay it on us. We're ready. We've been warned.
I know. I will tell you, it does not get any better. It only gets worse. Oh. I'm just gonna mention that.
Okay. Rip the Band-Aid off. Go ahead.
Okay. So at this time, in her depression, in her financial loss, she was still married to Charles Woodring, and she realized he was having an affair.
Oh.
Yeah. And according to history, less than 4 months after Lawrence had lost her mother, she found this out. And regardless of the cause, the couple divided their estate, the very little bit of estate they had at that point, and they filed for divorce by December of that year. And in 1933, at age 47, Florence married again. She married a man named Henry Bolton. And this is a marriage that only lasted 5 months because he beat her severely.
Oh, no. Oh, no, Missy.
She wasn't a good man picker.
No, I would say
She was not
not
a good man chooser. And it's so sad.
Oh.
It's so sad. And, of her 3 husbands, he definitely seems like he was probably the worst of the lot. They all kind of suck.
Yeah,
but
they've got progressively worse.
Yeah, he seems the worst. Little is known about him, but according to, again, Kelly R. Brown of Grunge, it was clear that he was an abusive alcoholic who publicly embarrassed the actress on multiple occasions and openly proclaimed that he would hit his wife if she dared try to upstage him.
Oh, gosh.
Upstage him. I know, it's just, ugh. So, 5 months, of course, into the marriage, his excessive drinking, his temper, his toxic masculinity just reached this point, according to women film pioneers, that he beat her so badly that she just finally filed for divorce.
Thank goodness. I'm glad it was only 5 months.
I know. Thank God she, came to her senses and, ugh. So, that was the last time she would ever marry. She never had children. Mm-hmm. And, of course, her professional comeback was never successful. And, she continued to take those small parts, mostly from sympathetic directors who remembered her from her early films and knew she had some experience. Mm-hmm. In 1936, she was hired by MGM, which was attempting to revive past stars, again, through those mainly small bit parts, and she received $30 to $40 a week. A big difference from that $1,000 a week that she had been making in her heyday.
Yeah.
The results were less than fulfilling. By then, Lawrence was suffering from myelofibrosis, a painful, debilitating, and eventually fatal bone marrow disease.
Oh, gee.
She was also living in a vermin-infested 2-room apartment in West Hollywood with...
How far we fall.
I know.
Oh.
I know. With a guy named Bod Brinlow, a studio worker, and also his sister, so the 3 of them were roommates.
Oh, boy.
because none of them were making very much money. And she continued to be well-spoken. She would talk to people. She would talk to strangers. She wanted to be remembered. She wanted to be recognized. Yeah. And apparently she was very well-spoken. She could talk on everything. They said from Hitler to cultivating roses to those few reporters who were willing to, stop and chat with her and who remembered her. Yeah. But it was clear that she had kind of outstayed her welcome. And as a side note here, remember how we put a pin in Florence's inventions?
Yes, her inventions.
Both the turn signal.
Well, we know this is not going well. Okay.
And the brake signal. Well, Florence, always more of an artist than a business mogul, like her mother, never patented these life-saving devices. No. So not only did she not, like there's a difference. Her mom at least patented them and then didn't
renew them.
Didn't renew the patent and got screwed.
Yeah.
She invented these amazing things and just never got around to patenting them. Don't you think her mother
should have told her?
She was working for an automotive company. Right. Shouldn't the mother have said, "Hey, we don't know what happened." I know. It's so mind-boggling and so depressing.
Yeah.
So of course she never benefited from them financially or was acknowledged at all.
Did anybody take her ideas?
Oh yeah.
They knew. Somehow they were published.
Somehow people knew about the ideas even though she didn't receive patents. I don't think she could keep a secret very well.
Oh, that could be, yeah.
I think, she talked about them quite a bit and shared her ideas with people. And okay, this is very sad. And not to give everything away here at this point, but it does get very tragic at this point. And I'm going to give you a trigger warning because I am going to talk about suicide right now. It was at 1 p.m. on December 28th, 1938, that Florence phoned the studio where she was working that afternoon. And she was claiming that she just wasn't feeling well. And later that afternoon, she ingested ant poisoning and cough syrup at her West Hollywood home. Aww. Medics were unable to save her, and she died at 2:45 p.m. Aww. She was 52 years old.
Oh, she wasn't terribly old.
She was younger than both of us.
Right.
A note was found at the home that she shared with Brinlow saying, "Dear Bob, call Dr. Wilson. I am so tired. Hope this works. Goodbye, my darling. They can't cure me, so let it go at that. Lovingly, Florence. P.S. You've all been swell guys. Everything is yours."
Oh, that is so sad.
I know. I know. It just makes me so sad.
You think about her diversity of talents, how many promising chapters to her life. It's like, how does it end like that?
How does it end like that? She was just a force to be reckoned with. Yeah. Diminished.
Completely.
To
nothing
nothing.
left.
Oh.
Wow.
So, people automatically assumed that Florence ended her own life in despair over the state of her career. But it honestly seems more likely, according to people that knew her, that her depression caused by her disease was to blame. She was constantly in pain.
Yeah.
She never got over that post-traumatic stress, the depression. She just never bounced back after those two accidents that happened when she was filming. And then, of course, she was beaten by her husband. Her other husband was unfaithful. She lost her mother. It just...
a lot. Yeah.
It just was too much. So, and, they speculate this, too, because she did continue to work. She was a very hard-working woman, and she continued to do those bit parts. She was, continued to work in the studios.
Yeah, talk about sucking it up.
Yeah,
going forward.
Yeah. She went from making $1,000 a week to making $30 a week. It's kind of, the note that she left behind, though, did retain, I think, a little bit of her former spirit. Kind of with the, P.S., you guys have been swell. Everything is yours, Goodbye, my darling. Her funeral was held on December 30th, 1938, and there were not enough funds in her estate to cover her funeral expenses. But thankfully, Mary Pickford, who was a friend of hers and her co-star at Biograph Pictures, ran an organization called the Motion Picture Relief Fund, and they paid for Lawrence's funeral. Thank God.
That was
Mary
nice.
Pickford.
Thank you, Mary Pickford.
I know. And she died penniless and sad and just 9 years prior, she had paid for that really expensive memorial for her own mother. And of course now, here she was, completely penniless. She was buried in an unmarked grave at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And the following year, in 1939, the Buick Company launched what it trumpeted as being the first electrical device to indicate a vehicle's turning, with no acknowledgement of Lawrence at all and her pioneering role.
Yeah. Well, not too surprisingly, but very, very tragically.
Oh my God. And, you know, I mentioned it was an unmarked grave, and it would be 53 years before actor and film history buff Roddy McDowall, serving on the National Film Preservation Board, decided to step up and pay for a headstone for Lawrence in 1991.
Well, that's, so she, you know, there is a little silver lining that she was valued and remembered by some of the
people realized how important she was to the fucking industry. People realized, you know, this was a powerhouse.
She was a trendsetter.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This is a pioneering trendsetter.
On
absolutely.
On a lot of levels.
In so many ways, right. And so the inscription on it reads, Florence Lawrence, the biograph girl, the first movie star.
Oh, beautiful. That was beautiful.
I know, we gotta go. So she leaves behind such a legacy, of course, that has paved the way for name recognition of performers today. She was, of course, the very first actor to receive that screen credit. And I just want to remind you about her career, which spanned decades, and she was in over 300 films.
Wow.
She's also known as the Girl of 1,000 Faces. I thought that was interesting. Apparently, she was a very diverse actress. She could pull off a lot of different roles, apparently.
Interesting.
And again, she was one of the first women to own her own production company. She was an accomplished mechanic, a race car driver. And of course, lastly, she was that unsung genius and innovator whose ideas continue to keep us safe on the road today.
Yes.
According to Girls Do Film, perhaps those unclaimed and overlooked inventions sum up Lawrence's career better than any biography, identifying a need and a gap in the market, but failing to capitalize on its full potential.
Aww.
We love you.
Oh,
we love you, Florence Lawrence.
Thank you, Florence Lawrence, and thank
Flo
you,
the
Missy.
Wonder Child. We love you.
Missy, thank you for this one. This was an awesome
No.
Sheila.
And you know what I want? Let's go to Hollywood Forever and visit her grave.
Oh, let's do that.
Let's do that.
We always have these great ideas for field trips.
Yeah, we have
do
the
it.
list going, and we could go over there. We'll bring you with us. We'll put it on Instagram. We'll go and say hello and bring her some flowers. Let's do it.
I love it.
Let's do it.
It's
Awesome.
a deal.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. I know it's a tragic tale, but we love you.
Thank you.
Bye. Until next time.
Sheela, Sheela, SheelaNaGig on a bed.